Wherever people settle, water is their first concern. Sometimes it means building a barrier to provide an adequate water supply. Sometimes it means overcoming the barrier that water can often create. From time to time, these structures of concrete and steel fail us, and a mighty dam cracks and crumbles, turning a beautiful valley into a watery tomb. On the French Riviera, it is another day of rain, particularly over the Reyran River valley. But for the citizens of Fréjus, at the base of the valley, it is nothing new. Fall and spring are traditionally very wet, so much so that they actually create a river. Dry in summer, the Reyran River is born in winter and spring, flowing down to Fréjus before emptying into the Mediterranean Sea. Like many French villages, there are two parts to Fréjus. One is the old town on the hill, where in 1959, Rose Dutot and Marthe Sépi live with their families.
In 1959, I was 28 years old. I worked with my parents, who had a grocery store in the city center, and I already had a 6-year-old daughter.
We lived in the center of town, on the cathedral side, and we were living well. My parents were living on the street just below us.
The ancient houses and streets clustered on the hill are a contrast to the bright, modern villas spreading out on the lowland plains.
At the time, Fréjus was primarily an agrarian town, made up of fruit trees and other crops, which required a lot of water.
The properties were around 10 to 15 hectares. My parents had an older farm that dated back to the 19th century. It was like a lot of farms in Provence.
Michelle Merot's family have been farmers for 4 generations, and although she boards at a private school during the week, she has spent most of her 15 years growing up on the farm. Like many farmers in the valley, the Merots can look back to days when fields were regularly devastated by floods brought on by heavy rains. That has not been the case since the Malpasset Dam was completed in 1954. While several sites are considered, officials decide on the steep V-shaped terrain of the Reyran River Canyon, a choice based on geological studies indicating this site to be most favorable.
Les autorités locales, n'est-ce pas, ont donc repris tous ces projets.
In 1947-48, the local officials invited the world-renowned dam builder of the time, Mr. André Coyne, to submit a proposal for their project.
Monsieur André Coyne, n'est-ce pas, de proposer des projets de barrage.
To build the Malpasset, Coyne uses thin concrete walls arched in the direction of the river's downstream pressure. This pressure compresses the walls tightly against the rock, strengthening the dam so that it requires less concrete to build. During construction, the rock foundation is inspected prior to placing the concrete, but no deficient geologic conditions are found. However, adjustments must be made to the dam immediately adjacent to valley walls. While the right side abuts directly to the rock face, a concrete wing is built on the left to close the gap between concrete and canyon. The dam is completed in 1954, and for the next 5 years, the reservoir behind it slowly fills, offering for the first time a controlled water supply to the valley below.
The dam was their life. For my family, it brought happiness because they finally had water. We could finally farm a variety of fruits and vegetables.
By the fall of 1959, the lake behind the Malpasset Dam contains almost 50 billion liters of water. The torrential rains of November have raised the level to near capacity.
It was during this time that they began to notice water leaking on the sides and other small things that troubled the engineers and the local authorities.
We sent technicians who were taking measurements twice a day, and it was one day in November. In one place, they saw a movement of 17 millimeters in the wall. Very little, and the engineer said that's normal because of all the water that has fallen. So no one was too concerned.
By November 30th, 1959, the water level has never been higher. Engineers discuss the possibility of opening the floodgates to relieve the pressure. They decide to wait rather than risk interrupting workers building a highway a kilometer downstream. Rumors about problems with the dam circulate through Fréjus. But on December 2nd, Rose Duteau is relieved when the rain diminishes in the afternoon, and skies clear enough for her father Leandre to make a change in plans.
In the afternoon, my father decided to go up to the Malpasset because we had a small country house there and we had several dogs there to be fed.
Although the rain has stopped, the water level at the dam is dangerously close to overflowing. At 6 p.m., engineers finally order gatekeeper André Ferraud to release some of the water.
The water flow was only about 40 to 50 cubic meters per second. But behind the dam, there was around 50 million cubic meters, which needed to be released. As it turned out, the decision to open the floodgates came a little too late.
Wednesday, December 2nd, 1959. After weeks of heavy rain, the evening sky above the French Riviera's Reyran Valley is clear and sprinkled with stars. At the family cottage near the Malpasset Dam, 62-year-old Leandre Deschamps settles in for the night. The rest of his family is at home in Fréjus, 7 kilometers downstream. Leandre's daughter Rose and her husband are watching television, like many of their neighbors in the town center and on the lower plains. 15-year-old Michelle Moreau is away at school, but her family is at their farm on the outskirts of Fréjus.
My parents were watching television with our neighbors, the Grangers, who were also very close friends. My second brother, my brother Gilbert, was watching television with my parents, and my older brother André was tired and went to bed.
Some 1,500 meters downstream from the Malpasset Dam, gatekeeper André Ferraud is also at home with his wife and 3-year-old son. Suddenly, Ferraud hears a loud cracking sound, followed by a violent wind that blows open his doors and windows. The Malpasset Dam cracks like an egg, then blows apart. Its left bank abutment collapses, swept away by the water now rushing past. 50 billion liters of reservoir roar down the Reyran River valley, a giant wall of water 10 meters high and 500 meters wide. It rips through the hamlet of Malpasset and the autoroute construction site, leaving no survivors behind as it heads for the town of Fréjus. At his family farm, André Moreau wakens to the sound of his home ripping apart.
He jumped out of bed. Thank God it was the right side of the bed, because half the wall was already gone. He climbed onto the little staircase which led to the attic, thinking that the rest of the family would be there. He also thought to bring his blanket. When he got there, he realized he was by himself. There was noise all around, and he thought he would be taken by the water. He didn't think the house would hold.
The swirling mass roars over farm buildings and houses as if they were made of cards. As the wall of water reaches Fréjus, it sweeps away the town's main bridges. It bowls over a 4-car passenger train as if it were a toy.
All at once, there was no more light, no electricity, and everyone thought they had been hit by a blackout. When they heard the roar of the water, they realized that a disaster was in the making.
In her home in the old town, Marthe Sepi hears people running and shouting in the streets.
We had military camps nearby, and sometimes the soldiers fought amongst themselves. So we opened the windows just to see what was happening, and across the street, one of our neighbors was shouting, "The dam fell down." I woke up my daughter, and it seemed to me that the water was going to reach us. We knew that the dam was big and that it was full. And we went out on the street with everyone else. Everybody was leaving their homes. We were petrified.
A giant arm of water curls around the hill on which the old town stands, washing over the lowlands below.
The water had an amazing force. Nothing could stop it. It engulfed the plains and took off everything that was there, even several factories, including one where they made cement pipes and tanks.
The wave continues past the town of Fréjus and heads for the Mediterranean, carrying houses, cars, and people with it. It leaves survivors like André and Gilbert Merot stranded in a quagmire of water, mud, and death.
Il a appelé et il a entendu mon frère second qui était.
He called out and he heard my youngest brother, who had pulled himself into a tree in front of the house. They were able to talk, and when the water calmed completely, my oldest brother, my brother André, went down with the blanket and got into the tree, and they spent the night together, waiting for help.
Il est descendu avec la couverture et monté sur le platane, et ils ont passé la nuit tous les deux en attendant les secours.
With no electrical power, there is little anyone can do in the pitch black of night. For those who are safe on higher ground, tomorrow is another day. But for many, tomorrow will never come. Thursday morning, December 3rd, 1959. 15-year-old Michelle Merot wakens to another day at the private school she attends during the week. But this morning, something is different.
Et au petit matin, j'entendais des bruits autour de moi.
Early that morning, I heard my roommates moving around, and this was unusual. I asked myself, why were they whispering all around me? So we all got up like usual, and we had our breakfast. They were all there with their newspapers. Every time I came near one of them, they would fold the newspapers, and I didn't understand.
Elle repliait le journal et je comprenais pas. Et la directrice de l'établissement m'a fait appeler et m'a dit voilà le barrage de Fréjus.
And the principal of the school called me and told me that the dam in Fréjus had exploded. We have concerns about your parents, but we have no news for you right now.
Pour l'instant, on n'a pas plus de nouvelles.
The collapse of the Malpasset Dam has left a path of destruction, starting at the dam site 7 kilometers north of Fréjus and ending at the Mediterranean coast. The lake that stretched for almost 10 kilometers behind the dam has disappeared, like water drained from a bathtub. Little remains of the dam, perhaps a tenth of what it once was. Down below, the Reyran Valley is a paddy field of water and red mud.
The trees were uprooted. Trucks were stacked one on top of the other. My husband came back around 2 hours later saying, "You wouldn't believe it. You can't even imagine."
Yet, there are those who are already organizing the rescue of survivors, the recovery of the dead, and the overwhelming task of giving aid to those who have lost everything.
N'est-ce pas? Et il fallait tout de suite prendre des mesures pour venir.
We had to immediately take measures to help the victims of the disaster, to organize shelter, to organize meals.
Il fallait leur donner à manger. Il y a eu un moment.
So right after the people were completely beaten, they had to immediately roll up their sleeves and come to the aid of the population.
Et venir en aide des populations.
L'armée nous a prêté des hélicoptères.
The army lent us helicopters. The helicopters flew over to try and see bodies that were there, and then we got trucks and we transported these bodies to the morgue.
Parce que dans la plaine, il avait beaucoup plu. Cette terre est argileuse.
In the plains, the ground was made of clay, and we couldn't even stand on our feet. So people had small boats. They took out their small boats and recovered the people from the mud.
Among the first to be rescued are André and Gilbert Merot, who have spent the night stranded above the muck and the mire.
They were there together in the tree from midnight to about 5 in the morning. Authorities arrived in little boats and were able to find them.
Rose Duteau and her family are among those safe on the high ground of the old town, but one family member is not among them.
So my husband, my brother, and a friend of ours decided to go up there. The next morning they found him at the foot of the dam, and we had a lot of grief, because if he wouldn't have gone to feed the dogs, he wouldn't be dead. He wouldn't have been taken by the wave.
Michel Merot also receives bad news.
Donc la directrice m'appelait une nouvelle fois pour me dire.
The principal called me again to tell me that my aunt was waiting for me, and everyone had died except for my 2 brothers who were saved. There, that's it. It's always hard to talk about, even 45 years later.
Il faut pas que je me fasse pleurer. Non, il faut pas.
They found my father right away. My mother wasn't found till 3 or 4 days later.
Fortunately, food, water, and clothing pour in from neighboring communities and from countries across Europe as government agencies work to restore rail and road links to the Reyran region. In the end, 421 are confirmed dead, although many believe the count to be much higher.
Je suis persuadé qu'il y a encore des corps qui n'ont pas été retrouvés.
I am convinced there are still bodies which have not yet been found and are somewhere in the holes, in the mud.
A commission of engineers finds the design of the dam to be satisfactory, and tests show that joints between the remaining concrete and the canyon walls are still strong. The cause lies not in the dam, but in the rock itself. Tests show that a thin clay-filled seam adjacent to the dam's left bank is composed mainly of mica, which breaks down more easily under pressure.
Ils ont fait des essais en laboratoire.
They took some samples and found that when they put them in water, they would dissolve, and that caused the dislocation of the wall.
2 consecutive commissions find that preliminary geological surveys of the Reyran Valley were inadequate. A government engineer is implicated in the investigation, as is dam designer André Coyne. Legal battles continue, ultimately leading to the acquittal of those originally indicted and leaving the question of responsibility unanswered. Although the Malpasset Dam is never rebuilt, its lesson impacts the construction of future projects, confirming that an arch dam, no matter how dependable a design, is only as strong as the rock that supports it. The impact on the people of the Reyran Valley is much more far-reaching.
My mother was very unhappy, and she died 2 years after father, of sorrow. She never got over it.
My brothers and I decided very quickly that we wanted to move back to the farm, all 3 of us, because we were very much in need of one another.
If there is a silver lining to the disaster, It is that it offers the region a chance to rebuild and restructure its economy.
En réalité, compte tenu de l'importance des dons qu'a Fréjus reçus,
the donations that Fréjus received, the money, was a new start for Fréjus. It was good for the economy. The new highway brought a flow of people, many curious about the disaster, and it set off the hotel and restaurant industry here. Effectively, it brought economic development to Fréjus.
Today, Fréjus is a bustling tourist town, a gem in the crown of the French Riviera. Above it, vestiges of the Malpasset Dam stand side by side with remnants of its Roman past.
For a lot of Fréjusiens, it is a reference. They don't say before 1960, they say before the dam or after the dam. It's a reference which surrounds all discussions about Fréjus. I left adolescence and entered adulthood because of the dam. Life was short. You had to live it and live it fully.
It turned my life upside down and made everything else less important. It made me realize everything can be lost from one day to another. There were 500 deaths. Fréjus must remember them.